Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our In Conversation with American author Martha Hall Kelly. Martha, thank you so much for coming in this evening to talk to us.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Let me give everyone a little bit of background about you. Martha is the author of 3 historical fiction novels, Lilac Girls, which became a New York Times bestseller the week it was published in 2016, Lost Roses, and her new novel, Sunflower Girls. The 3 novels trace the stories of 3 generations of the Woolsey and Faraday families. Martha holds a degree in journalism from the Newhouse School at Syracuse University and a master's degree in journalism from Northwestern University's Medill School. She lives in Connecticut and Martha's Vineyard with her family. Before we talk about your latest novel, Sunflower Sisters, I just happen to have a copy of here. Let's go back in time and talk about Lilac Girls and Lost Roses. I believe you researched the story 10 years before Lilac Girls was released. What sparked the inspiration for the writing of these books?
Oh gosh, it seems like ages ago now. It's so funny. But back in 2000, my mom had just passed away and it was Mother's Day. And I was feeling really sad. And we had 3 little kids at the time. And my husband said, why don't you go up and see that house you've always wanted to go see, a museum, maybe about an hour north of where we lived at the time in Connecticut. And he knew I wanted to go see the Bellamy Faraday house. That's Caroline Faraday's former home. She died in 1990. And I really love lilacs, and my mother did too. And I really wanted to see the lilacs that they had planted up there, she and her mother. So he did not have to ask me twice with 3 little kids. And I got in the car and just drove away up to the house. And it was just such a wonderful, wonderful getaway. And the garden was beautiful. And afterwards I thought, well, I'll take the tour inside because it's a house museum now. And when I walked around inside, I don't know what happened. I feel like I bonded with Caroline Faraday. She had been passed away for years. But once I saw her desk, which is up on the 2nd floor landing, she was such a huge Francophile. And she had her pictures of Charles de Gaulle and Napoleon and her big old Remington typewriter, manual typewriter. I was drawn to a small photograph of maybe 50 or so ladies, middle-aged women lined up in rows for a camera. And the docent told me those are the rabbits. Those were women that were experimented on at Ravensbrück concentration camp. And Caroline brought them to the United States for rehabilitation and the trip of a lifetime. So once she told me that, I started researching that story, just in love with her and the fact that she would do something like that. We don't have that many heroes these days, especially women. And I just wanted to find out more about her.
Oh, gee, and that was the beginning. And how long did it take you to actually write Lilac Girls?
Well, I didn't really plan on writing a novel. I know that sounds crazy, but I'm not a novelist, and I had not studied it in school. I had studied journalism, as you had said. So for 5 years or so, I just went up to the house and went down into the archives under the root cellar up at the house where Caroline had kept all of her special things. And then one day I met a book editor and she said, all I need is a chapter. And I thought, that's crazy, because she liked the idea and she had a Polish daughter-in-law. And she thought, hey, that could be a good book. And then my husband and I moved down to Atlanta, Georgia. And one day, after all that researching, I went through a Starbucks drive-through. I don't know if they have those in Australia.
We have a few
and
Starbucks.
I ordered They do? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I ordered my usual decaf cappuccino grande, and by mistake, the barista gave me a caffeinated one. And I went home, and the Caroline chapters just poured out. It was a very weird experience. Yeah. And after that, there are 3 characters in that book. So then I had to go to Poland and Germany in order to understand Herta Oberhauser, the doctor in the book, and then Kasha, one of the rabbits. But that caffeine sent me on my journey.
And you really do have to visit the places that you're writing about too to get, if you can, to get a good feel of the landscape, the people, the buildings. Otherwise, I know Google is good, but it's not the same as being there.
Well, I think the reader can tell. The reader can tell everything. I've learned. If you're bored with the scene, it comes through. And if you haven't been to a place, it's hard to get that particularity. All those little things that really make it ring true. So I try to go whenever I can to the settings. I went to Russia for Lost Roses, which was amazing.
Oh,
So
wow.
I think that it really shows in the writing. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. When you wrote Lilac Girls, did you intend that to be the first of a series, but it's a series told in reverse? Most series are told moving forward. Yours is told in reverse. Was that your intention, or is that something that you just decided to do?
It was not intentional. Well, first of all, when I wrote Lilac Girls, I thought, oh, this will just be self-published. No one knows who I am. I don't know how to write a book. So I had to learn all that as I went. And I figured when I get to the end of it, I'll just self-publish it. And then that's not what happened.
No.
I did reach out to agents, and it became this thing. And I was so surprised. And then in this country, when I came out in paperback, it really went crazy. I don't know what happened. Word of mouth just was like cuckoo. And
Mm.
so once that happened, my husband said, "Oh, you better go back to them. This is your what did he call it? Some sort of like point of leverage or something." And I thought, "Oh, okay, well, I've got leverage. I better go back." And I pitched them for two more books. But I had already done research on the other people
Mm.
in the family. So I thought, what if I went back in time and did the mom and then the grandmother?
Mm.
So that's what I did. And they said, sure, go ahead. But it's
Yeah.
it's different to sell a manuscript for a book that's already written and then sell two books that are just blank pages. There's a little stress involved there, but it all worked out great.
They must have had confidence in your ability, though, to do that.
They sure did. But, at one point I thought, how did they have this much confidence? But it worked out great.
Yeah. And tell us, just for our information, how do they classify a New York Times bestseller? Is it based on the amount of books sold in a short period of time? Or
That's exactly right. It's very
okay.
mysterious, the formula that they use. They say that it's mostly independent bookstores, which, as you can imagine, is very hard during
Mm.
COVID because they were all closed. But it's physical books, no ebooks or audiobooks. And it is when you debut, it's always on a Tuesday.
Mhm.
And the Wednesday after, they already know if you've made the list or not. And
Wow.
it's very stressful. And all the publishers are just like, very happy when you do make it.
Yep.
But what happens is Wednesday at 5 o'clock, they find out where you are on the list if you're on it at all. And they take all of your back sales. So any pre-sales. And that is the first day you're on the list. All those pre-sales can kind
Mm.
of count towards your number. And then after that, every week, it's just that week's sales.
Okay.
If
Okay.
that
And that's
makes
why
sense at all.
pre-sales are really important now for authors.
Really important. Yeah. And all the numbers are down from what they used to be. But, it's kind of a level playing field because nobody can get out and do a book tour now, at
Mm.
least in this country. And now it's getting a little better, but still, publishers are reluctant to plan anything because I think that, they got burned last time. Like halfway through my Lost Roses paperback tour, we had to stop. And, they lose a lot of revenue from that. So
Yeah.
I think they're
Yeah.
being more cautious this time.
Although with COVID, a lot of people rediscovered reading too, which was a good thing. I know we were busy. We were doing mail outs of boxes of books to our patrons, who were so grateful for that because to some people, books are their life, especially elderly people. So we just found that people rediscovered reading and they trusted us as working in a library to send out books that they'd like. So that was a bit of a challenge for us all. We asked people to give us an idea of what authors or what style of reading that you like to read, and we will pick books that we think you would like, which was a bit challenging when 70% of our collection was out on loan at one stage because nothing could come back. They couldn't, return their books through the return chute during COVID. So we had some really great feedback from a lot of people who said, I've just discovered so many new writers that I didn't even know existed, and I wouldn't have even probably picked up the books off the shelf had you not sent them in the mail to me. So for us, it was a very positive experience.
That's so fun. I love that. We should learn from that, I think. How do you send them out? In the mail or?
We mailed them. Yes, we had boxes of books and we mailed them out to people. So I know in my area, my little Australia postman in his little van, his van was chock-a-block full of boxes of things every single day because, of course, online shopping went crazy while we were all locked down as well. I assume you were probably the same too, to a certain extent.
We did more. You could go pick it up at the library and they would leave it on a table somewhere that was, COVID free.
Yeah.
That sounds like a novel, though, don't you think? Someone should write that.
Well, there you go. There's an inspiration for you right there.
Well, I can't because it's about Australia and I would have to go there and I'm not allowed now. So.
No, but if you ever do, you're more than welcome to come and see us here at the library. We'd love to have you.
I would love to do that. I've had so many great conversations with Australia. I have it on my bucket list now. I want to see the little animals. I can't remember what they're called.
The koalas and the kangaroos and wallabies.
The what?
The wallabies. They're like a small kangaroo
that people keep taking selfies with.
Oh, probably the koala bears.
On an island, and they're very little.
Oh, the penguins.
They're actually, anyway, I don't want to.
No, that's fine. But we've got a whole lot of.
They're called like corkies or quokkas or.
Quokkas.
Yeah.
Quokkas. Okay.
That's on the top of my bucket list.
We'll sort it out when you come.
Okay. Sounds good.
Now, even though the three novels can be read as standalone books, I'm really grateful that I've read Sunflower Sisters first because I feel that I can now go on and read the next two and I've got the whole family to read about. For the benefit of our viewers, can you tell us what Sunflower Sisters itself, which is this one here, is all about?
Wow, it is. If people have read Lilac Girls, that does give them a little bit of a frame of reference. They know who Caroline Faraday is, at least. She was a socialite and an actress in New York City. And the house that we're talking about is her summer home. And that's where she had the rabbits, these Polish women that had been experimented on. She had them come to visit her up there. So Sunflower Sisters is about Caroline Faraday's great-grandmother, Jane Eliza. And Jane Eliza was an incredible woman. It's really interesting because that's where all Caroline's philanthropy came from. And she was so, so proud of her Woolsey ancestors. And Jane Eliza grew up on a slaveholding plantation in Virginia, and she always hated slavery. And she instilled that in her children, this really strong sense of abolition. She wanted to fight to end slavery. She met a man named Charles Woolsey, and they fell in love instantly on the streets of New York City. In those days, you had to be introduced, and there was a lot of protocol. But those two, they fell in love at first sight, and it's just such a sweet story. They had 7 daughters, and I can't even imagine. I have 3 children, and I found that challenging, but she had 7 daughters. And when her husband so sadly was killed at sea in a terrible steamship accident, and she had to pick herself up and go on because she was now a single parent and pregnant at that time with a baby that turned out to be a boy. After Charles Woolsey died, the father, she gave birth to his son that they had always wanted a boy after 7 girls, and he never got to see that. But so she took the whole group of them down to New York City to live near family. And she raised her children to be just this incredible group of women. And they became famous in New York for not only becoming nurses, the first nurses in the Civil War, which, they really had to battle some terrible things from the male nurses and from the doctors as well, who just did not want them around. But they were really well educated, and several of them wrote books on their own, and they just were amazing women. It was hard to choose which one to write about because, my books are from the first person point of view. And so I chose the middle daughter, Georgiana, because her whole goal was not only to be a nurse in the Civil War, and she didn't meet any of the qualifications. She wasn't old enough. They had a rule that nurses had to be kind of homely, and she was very beautiful. And so she worked around all of that to become a nurse. And I just loved her ingenuity and her relationship with her sister, who also became a nurse. And I often write about sisters. So I thought Georgiana would be the perfect person to write about.
And of course, there was Gemma as well, the slave girl, who I thought was very capable and very bright too. And it was interesting with her relationship with the plantation owner's wife, Anne May, who to me I thought was quite incapable of doing quite a lot of things too.
Yes, that's a nice way of putting it, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, like she was in a position as well. Her husband was away at war. She had to manage the plantation on her own. In fact, I wondered reading the book whether she actually was capable of writing at all, because she got Gemma to do all the writing for her in her books.
She was not capable of writing. You're exactly right. Yeah,
she was very good at bluffing her way. Yeah, she bluffed her way through a lot of things. But one thing I noticed with your book, it's lovely to learn something when you read a book, even though it is fiction, but mainly based on fact. I didn't know that the White House was mainly built by slaves when it was constructed. And I went down the Google search then. I thought, I didn't know about that, because we don't learn a lot about American history over here. And so I Googled it and I thought, oh, goodness, well, I didn't know that. But it makes sense in a way, with most of the people away at war. The only people that were left were the slaves, and they built the original White House.
It's incredible. It's funny you say that you didn't know a lot of that. I'm from this country and I didn't know a lot of it. So it was fun for me too to learn all of that, and really symbolic when you think about it, especially what we're going through these days. But everything, I had a rule, and I do in general about research, is if it's interesting to me and I've never heard it, I really try and put it in, because I feel like then probably other people don't know either. Things like, I don't know if you remember the part where they go to visit the White House.
Yes.
And they actually did meet Lincoln. I read all their letters, and a meeting with Lincoln was in there, and they talk about it. But I love that Lincoln talks to them about people have been taking souvenirs from the
that was fascinating.
The drapes and the carpet. Because I read in some newspaper account that people were going in and hacking off like a piece of a drapery or a piece of the carpet and just taking it. I was just like, what? How's that even possible?
Yeah, and taking a pair of scissors or something with them, or a knife or something. Gosh, these days you wouldn't get into the White House because, all the security and metal detectors. Yeah.
Right. It was fascinating to me. And poor Lincoln, they talk about him. People would like go into his residence and things. They didn't have any boundaries.
Yes.
And he felt like this was the people's house, and he had to kind of entertain anyone that came in. It was really, really interesting. Things have changed.
Oh, they sure have. Now, can you speak about the differences between North and South at that time too? Because you had Americans fighting against each other. That must have been terrible.
Yeah. Well, it was a long time coming. And the southern part of, at that time, mostly just the eastern part of the United States was settled. So the southern part was all dependent on agriculture. Cotton was at new heights. They had tried to get rid of slavery, and they were starting to make progress, but then the cotton boom happened and the cotton gin. And, there was this resurgence in slavery again. They were not allowed to bring any more slaves into the country, but they could buy and sell them still. And of course, when the enslaved people had children, they could buy and sell them too as well. So they really didn't need to. I mean, it's just horrific when you really talk about it. But what happened was it got to the point where the northern states said, okay, no more slavery. And the South said, you can't tell us what to do. And it all started, it started a war. And it was so tragic because North and South, which is called the Union and the Confederates, they really were physically fighting against each other.
Yeah, it's so sad.
Like friends and brothers. And it was just really tragic. And people thought the war was going to be over in, a week or two. And, they had so many misconceptions. They used to drive out in their horse and buggies from Washington and have picnics overlooking the battlefield.
Oh,
and that, I know. And they thought that they didn't take it as seriously as they should. So when it dragged on year after year, and the South, I think we look back on it, we know that the North won, but if you really look at it, we were in danger of the Confederates, the Southern Army, taking over the White House. It came very, very close. That's why Gettysburg, which I show in the book, that big battle of Gettysburg in Pennsylvania, was so important because it was a turning point in the war. That was the time. There were many Northern defeats after that, but it was a time when it started to seem like it was possible that the North was going to win. So after that happened, of course, there was no more slavery, but that didn't mean that the problems were over for the former enslaved people, because, in this country, they quickly figured out how to enact laws that would limit the success of the former enslaved people. So it's just such a horrible stain on our country. It is.
It's
so
and it's still going on to a very small extent now. It's something that maybe will never ever die out. The feelings of people, which is very, very sad.
People feel like they should have reparations, and there's just this whole lingering effect of slavery on people. And but you're right. I don't know if it will ever go away. So it's a really important thing, I think, to understand. And hopefully we're making progress. Some days it feels like we're going backwards in time, but I hope that, we're going forward.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Now, the differences in class as well, and the way they dressed, you describe beautifully in the novel. Those hoop dresses must have been challenging to wear for those poor women.
Well, Anne May, I think, loves her hoop. She's from way further in the South. Maryland is a border state where the whole thing takes place, and on the border of North and South. And she's from Louisiana, which is way down, almost towards Texas. And so she's what they would call a Southern belle, with the accent and the whole thing.
Yes.
And the thing about hoop skirts that I learned a lot about hoop skirts too. The thing is, they hit a lot of figure problems. So if you could corset your waist to look small enough, the rest of it was hidden under there. And the women loved their hoop skirts because it made them, look fabulous all the time. And she especially really likes her hoop. Now, the Wolsey women, though, when they were nurses, were not allowed to wear a hoop because it took up, they were huge. It took up so much space, and they were on hospital ships and, tending to wounded. And you had to, they literally ran around the hospital ships all day and all night. So, you couldn't be wearing a hoop. And the hoops were dangerous, very dangerous.
Well, you'd have to have doorways that were wide enough to fit through, too. Today's doorways, you would never get through.
Yes. And getting into a carriage, it was just this whole thing. But so many women, thousands of women all around the world caught fire. They were very flammable because they wore these crinolines underneath. And if you got too close to a fire, you would just go up. There was
Oh,
nothing you
gee.
could do about it. People would get blown over into water and drown, pulled down by the great book, The Piano and movie.
Yes,
I
yes,
think it takes place in New Zealand.
it does. Yes,
My favorite. Do you remember the scene where Holly Hunter
yes.
gets pulled down into the water? I always think of that with hoop skirts because it was a very similar thing, but they were very, very dangerous.
And when did they eventually die out, the hoop skirts? What era
Well,
did
turn
they
of the
die out?
century, pretty soon after the Civil War,
Mm,
um, during the Victorian era, there were no more
yeah,
hoop skirts.
yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
that'd be a
I think
sigh of
people get
relief
sick
for
of them.
people. Yeah, definitely. Now, for any aspiring writers out sitting out watching this tonight, have you got a piece of advice that you would share?
Oh, wow. Um, about starting a book or
Or if you're just in the process of, right, you think you've got a book in you, you've started to write something, what's something that you've experienced that you would think would be a very handy hint to pass on to people?
I have so many and no one ever listens to me. So it's really nice that you're asking. I think one thing nowadays, there's so much competition in terms of genre.
Mm,
There are some people that only read books, but nowadays people are watching TV and going to the movies and doing, watching TikTok. I don't know if they have that down in
they
Australia,
do, but I don't do that.
but there are a lot of things that are trying to grab people's attention. And I would
Distractions.
say, what was that?
Distractions.
So many distractions.
Mm,
And I think that the key is to try and write a book that keeps people's attention. Because I'm that type of a reader where if it's not really gripping me, I kind of float away. And
mm,
so I try and write that kind of a book. And I think the best way to do that, for me anyway, and it's hard to tell someone,
mm,
because it is a creative, thing. I think writing in scenes is really important. And that's something I learned just, I have 60 craft books or something, and I've
right.
read so many craft books. And that's one of the most important things that I found is that if you can write a chapter and really be somewhere and have it almost be an entity to itself and write it as a scene versus narrative summary.
Mhm.
When I first started writing, I didn't know anything, and I barely know much more now. But I started writing. I remember the caffeine story. I started writing as narrative summary, which would be like, I did this, I did that, and it wasn't. There was no conflict, and I think that it's so much easier if you're writing a scene set somewhere, almost like a movie. If you can kind
Mm,
of make that come to life, if possible, and I think particularity really, really helps. All that little kind of detail, but not too much. I think you
no.
have to find that kind of balance
Yeah.
between telling too much. Like, I hate reading about the meadow and the description of it if it's not tied to some sort of emotion
Yes.
or conflict. And I think that when you write a scene, it's a lot easier for the reader to kind of live in that world because we're used to watching TV series and Netflix.
Mm,
And
yeah.
the more you can make it come alive for the reader, the better.
Yeah, without going into too much detail. That's one thing that I don't like, when they describe, the blue, deep blue azure sky and the white cumulus clouds. And I think just say the clouds in the sky, it's like stick to the point.
I completely understand. But you know what? There are people like I think that Donna Tartt, for example, people love Donna Tartt, and rightly so, but she really gets into the descriptions.
Mm.
Some people like that. It's just, I
It's a
think
personal
this
thing.
reader that you're talking about, that we're talking to, who may be writing, just write what you like to read, and
Yes.
there will be people out there that want to read it, and write it how you like. Do you like a lot of description? Just be careful that it's not too much, but you're also going to have an editor if it gets published. And if it's a story that, just remember that to get an agent, which is how you get published, it
Mm.
has to be a viable thing that an agent can sell.
Mm.
And it has to be able to be boiled down into 2 or 3 lines, like a little elevator pitch. And an agent has to be able to go, ooh, that sounds interesting just from seeing that. So those are my
No,
tips.
that's good. Thank you. Well, I can certainly say with your book, because it was a big book. When I first saw it, I thought, oh, this one's going to be a bit of a challenge to read. But I can honestly say I just kept turning those pages because
Oh,
I honestly,
that's
I'm not
great.
lying, because it just kept me interested. And it was good the way you bounced back between 3 characters, between Gemma, Anne May and Georgiana, and the time period. And sometimes I actually went back and looked, okay, what month of that year was that? Okay, now I know it's moving forward. We're 3 months down the track now. It was just wonderful, and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Oh,
Thank you so much.
do you like cliffhangers? I do.
I do. But, I believe this book had a good ending, a satisfying ending.
Oh, really? Well,
Yeah,
it's the ending for all 3 of them in a way.
yeah,
I don't want to give you any spoilers because you're going to go ahead in time. But for
yes,
people that are reading backwards,
backwards.
yeah, it kind of goes full circle it goes kind of, yeah, I don't want to say too much,
No,
but
don't say too much. No
yeah,
spoilers. What sort of
yeah.
books do you like reading yourself? Do you like historical fiction or?
I do. Well, historical fiction was my gateway drug into
Mhm.
reading when I was younger. I just could not get enough of Amy Tan and, that type of
Yes.
historical fiction. Geraldine Brooks, I loved her Year of Wonders, the one about the plague, which is
Mhm.
weirdly kind
It's a
of
little, yeah, it's sort of
relevant to
a bit
today.
relevant now.
Yeah, although the plague, well, we kind of suffered through our suffering through our own kind of plague. So that was my favorite genre. But now I'm writing a thriller, and so I'm reading. I'll show you what I'm reading.
Yeah.
So many thrillers just to try and get it's a whole different kind of rhythm and feeling.
Yes.
Never Have I Ever? Have you
Oh, okay.
done? Loving that. And then the guest list, Lucy Foley.
Ah,
But I've
yes.
also been reading The Silent Patient and um, Woman in the Window,
Yes.
all of those. I also really like Leanne Moriarty. Um, so I'm kind of, delving into that genre now. Now that those 3 books are over,
Yeah.
now that I've written them, and I'm moving on to other genres,
So
it's
do you
really
have
fun.
another book that you're writing at the moment? Is that the style of book you're writing at the moment?
2 more, yeah. The
Oh,
next one, is called The Golden Doves, and it is about 2 women that survive Ravensbrück. It goes forward in time from Lilac Girls, finally, and it's an American woman and a French woman who survive Ravensbrück, and, they become Nazi hunters in a way. They hunt down a doctor that did some bad things to them at the camp, and they go all over the world trying to find this person, and
and
they
that's very true. There's people who are doing that right now. Mm.
yeah, and there's a lot of truth in it because a lot of the Nazis that should have been punished never were, and they came to this country in some of the rocket programs and things, and it just was not fair.
Mm.
So there's a lot of truth in that book, and they go from Vienna to Rome to South America. And it's been great writing that during COVID because, you can go all over the world.
Mm.
But so there's that, The Golden Doves. And then the next one is called The Girl on Windy Hill. And that is a thriller, contemporary thriller. And that's just one character. And that's been really fun to write, although scary. And it's set in my own town here in
Okay.
Connecticut, but it says
Yep.
it's Massachusetts, but it's really my town. And it's set in my house too, which I live in kind of like a big old house on a hay farm. And I'm scaring myself way too much, though. My husband said we have to move maybe because I can't go in the basement anymore because it's too scary.
Oh dear.
So, but it's been fun writing it.
That's good.
I love a good thriller.
So when is your next book due out? Would it be next year or the year after?
Next
Next
year,
year?
I think, but it's tough right now because Random House, they have a lot of books that are that they had to push because
Mm.
they couldn't be debuted back during COVID. So I'm not exactly sure date-wise what's happening, but I'm hoping it's next year because the Sunflower Sisters paperback has to come out next spring.
First, yeah.
So then I'm not sure if we can do the Golden Doves that fall, or will it be in the next spring? But it'll be ready. And it's fun. It's fun to kind of break out of these 3 books and do something completely fresh and different. So
I'll get the old brain cells going too.
Oh, the old brain cells. Yes, that's the key word there.
I don't mean old as in age. I'm just saying old as in
the old brain cells.
You know what I mean.
I know, but it does. It does help to do something different. They say like crossword puzzles help your brain, and I really believe that. And I think doing something different really, it's energizing.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Well, we'll look forward to seeing those when they come out. Now, if our patrons want to connect with you, what's the best way they can get in touch with you and find out what's happening in your world?
I think my website, which is marthahallkelly.com. And I'm also on all social media, way too overexposed. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and now TikTok, if you can believe it.
We talk about distractions. That's the trouble. There's too many things that we get online and think, oh, we better just check this and check that. And before you know it, an hour's gone and you've achieved nothing.
It's really easy to do that on TikTok. So don't go on TikTok.
I'm not going to.
Just a teeny. But I'm saying to listeners, it can be a real rabbit hole, but it can also be, if you're in a doctor's office, it's kind of a nice way to kind of distract yourself. But I think for young people, it's just taken over their lives. It's crazy.
It can be an addiction.
Yeah, social media, the usual ways to find me.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, look, all of Martha's novels are available to borrow in paperback form from the library. Please go to the catalogue and pop them on hold now. You're not going to be disappointed, that's for sure. Now, as a bonus, we also have a signed copy of Sunflower Girls to give away to a lucky viewer. To be in the chance of winning this novel, you need to answer this question and email us with the answer. The email address will be in the comments below, and the question is, what are the names of the 3 women that Martha writes about in Sunflower Sisters? And if you've watched this interview, that should be very, very easy to answer. Entries will close at midnight on Wednesday, the 23rd of June, and the winner will be notified. Thank you so much, Martha, for such an insightful discussion. It's been wonderful, and you are more than welcome to come out to our beautiful country anytime you like and come to Casey Academia Libraries. We would love to have you.
Okay. When they open that border, I'm there.
Wonderful. And look, I wish you every success with Sunflower Sisters. I don't think you'll have any troubles at all selling it, that's for sure, or borrowing it. It's just such a great book. And it's great for us, as I said, to read about situations in other countries of the world that we didn't know a lot about.
Well, thank you so much. This has been so much fun.
Terrific. Thanks, Martha.